Hello, everybody. It's your boy, Regnoy, and welcome to Corporate Brain Rot, Sony Edition. The day is December 13th, 2025. I just got two massive Sony headlines back to back, and I have to put off all of my fun projects again to talk more about this corporate brain rot bullshit. I'm sick of this. And Sony. But somebody needs to shine a light on their crap, and I swore to be the creator who would shine the light, exposing corporate brain rot to the masses. Disclaimer: this will be a pre-recorded broadcast with lots of audio breaks and cuts. I am currently deathly ill, and while I want to be there with all of you live to answer any questions and give you guys my best performance possible, I would only be worsening the experience with coughing fits and migraines. If anybody wants me to redo this live when I'm feeling better, just at me on Twitter or comment on this video. If there are any requests, I will happily do so. Disclaimer number 2. I will be speed running this presentation to try and get it finished before New Year's. That and I'll need to do recording, video editing, and a lot more that I didn't have to do for the original Corporate Brain Rot stream. The consequences of this may be as follows. Number 1. Missing less deep dives into certain incidents and companies. Number 2. Less jokes. Number 3. Me keeping some of my sanity and faith in humanity. Number 4. Less crash outs other than this entire fucking presentation. Number 5. No calling out specific people. And number 6. Less profanity. No, the irony of that is not lost on me. So, let's get into the history lesson, shall we? Just as a blanket statement to cover all of their previous nonsense. Number 1. Concord. Thank you all for coming. That's it. That's the whole presentation. Remember to like, subscribe, share this video around. I spent a lot of time working on this. I am so tired. You really want this? I can't just make a stupid gag and get out of doing this? Please. Don't make me do this. Fine. But if this goes on forever, that's on you. You have no idea how big Sony is. For this presentation, I will be going as far back as the year 2000. Partially to save time, partially because getting records any further back than that would be a massive pain, if not impossible. With that out of the way, let's begin. Number 2. Deleting everybody's movie purchases off of their PlayStation Network accounts with no refunds. Selling millions of CDs with malware installed onto them by them. Number 4. 5 counts of wage and hour violations. Basically, wage theft. Here are some records backing that up. 3 in 1 year, by the way. 3 in 1 year. That's impressive. Truly, $21 million. Hope it was worth it, assholes. Number 5, colluding with other animation studios to agree to not hire each other's animators so that they couldn't leave and they could stifle and depress their wages. What does that mean? Basically, they wouldn't have to pay them any more money. No raises, nothing like that. Here is the proof. Right here, the violation tracker individual record. Penalty $13 million in November 11th, 2016. Sony Pictures agreed to pay $13 million to settle litigation accusing it of engaging in a no-poach agreement with other studios in regard to the hiring of animators, thereby depressing pay levels. And number 6 will remain a secret for later. So, here's a fun fact. In my original Corporate Brain Rot stream, I called out Sony by name for lying to their investors. Does anybody here remember what that was? What they did to warrant that? No? Well, let's go back into lore and back Sony. Back story. Sorry about that. And Sony's first suckfuckery. The first article I stumbled across was by the Financial Times. Sony turns anime from fandom to financials. It sounds rather ominous and like a rather stupid title, but that's not the problem. Upon reading it, turns out it was just talking about how Sony made tons of money by investing in anime early. There are several stupid statements made in the article, but those are not the sin. It is a truly disturbing and horrifying revelation that explains a lot of developments in the past 5 years. These motherfuckers own Crunchyroll. Also, they apparently own Aniplex too, and through them, one of my favorite studios, A1 Pictures. Hold on a second. They own Power World too. Look at this. These motherfuckers own Power World. Wow, Sony really did just give Nintendo the middle finger. Wow. Whew, okay. Thus, any and all of Crunchyroll's new sins since August of 2021 now belong to Sony, both directly and indirectly, or at least not evidently direct. Let's tally those, but first, water drink. Because I'm starting to sound like a smoker. 12 Crunchyroll sins directly tied to Sony management. Let's get started. Number 1. Sony and Crunchyroll directly shared users' personal viewing data with Facebook. Number 2. Sony deleted users' purchased content from Funimation libraries after the merger. Number 3. Sony raised subscription prices as high as 20% shortly after the purchase with no incentive whatsoever to warrant the change. Number 4. Sudden union busting tactics and behaviors. Number 5. Post-merger management as out of touch and dismissive of anime as a product. Because that's who you want running an anime streaming service, people who hate anime. Number 6. Termination and layoffs targeting individuals in poor health. Number 7. Slashing budgets for translations and subtitles and removed all oversight. Number 8. Cutting merchandise and eliminating racier adult manga and toys entirely from sale. Ruining the user interface to pad engagement by wasting customer time. Number 10. Implementing cheap and faulty AI or third-party services to replace staff. Number 11. Antagonizing licensors and creators. They investigated themselves. No wrongdoing. Good job there. And number 12. Crappy animation adaptation games made by Sony after acquiring their IPs. Nah, I'm just fucking with you guys. It's canceling community outreach without telling their former partners or beneficiaries. Now, for Crunchyroll sins indirectly tied to Sony, we have removing comments in community forums, leaking premium subscribers' information on social media, denied breach. Yes, this is a separate incident. Number 3, missing episode files, bugged watch laters and playlists, and a quirky UI. Employing and backing toxic staff. Too many examples to fit here. Targeted hostility and harassment of employees with anxiety or depression. Aggressive DMCA escalation against piracy. The Crunchyroll Awards, if you know, you know. X-Arm, if you know, do not watch this. Ending the free subscription tier, routine massive layoffs in spite of rising profits, and throwing away fan letters and gifts meant for Crunchyroll voice actors. So, what bits of corporate brain rot are we going to be focusing on today? Here they are. God, that's a lot of bullshit. Okay. No, let's start off with Sony deleted purchased content from Funimation libraries after the merger. After acquiring Crunchyroll, Sony merged their own anime streaming service, Funimation, into the Crunchyroll library. which heavily screwed with the user interface and format. But not only that, since they're moving Funimation into Crunchyroll, and not the other way around, all of Funimation's users had their libraries wiped clean. Meaning that all of the movies that they bought, all the TV shows that they bought through the Funimation interface were deleted with no refunds. Fans and users pointed out the issue and filed numerous complaints, reaching out online and through customer service trying to figure out what had happened and get the issue either corrected or refunds, because of course you'd want that. That's a lot of money that they just deleted from the face of the earth. I would like to quote Sony and Crunchyroll executives word for word here, so bear with me as I put this as eloquently and precise as possible.
Fear the old roly-poly.
Predictions are true. How can this be? It's beautiful. Yeah! Please, before I die, teach me the true ways of the roly-poly.
In the immortal words of the ancient roly-poly Elder Lords. Get gears, Gerb.
Oh, come on.
If you don't like that one, we also have
Nada, zilch. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Public image is for sale, number 2. This symptom applies to the obvious damage to the reputations of both Crunchyroll and Sony Pictures Entertainment with this action. Number 26. Criminal activity is okay and encouraged if deemed profitable. They technically did not break any laws, as court precedents have encouraged and protected them under the legal difference of licensing and selling, as well as their terms of service saying that they can remove or modify content at their leisure and discretion. Personally, I think if you're using the word buy without license immediately afterward, then it should be treated as selling and not licensing. But that's just common sense, I guess. Regardless, they sold their customers millions of dollars in online media and deleted it all because they either didn't care enough to port the customers' accounts to the new servers, or did it intentionally in hopes of some of them being big enough suckers to buy it all over again. And number 3, the customer is always stupid. Sony believed that profound arrogance and entitlement toward their customers would be the solution to this problem, believing that they could do whatever they wanted and face no consequences for it. And they were right. Number 50. Never take accountability. This one is important. Remember this here. Offered compensations for losses included a month's subscription to Crunchyroll and gift codes. What are gift codes? I don't fucking know either, but they offered some. But the best part is that this wasn't the last time they did it either. Referencing what I mentioned earlier, they also started deleting movies off of people's PlayStation libraries because they didn't want to re-sign the right to license and sell those movies. So over 1,300 movies were deleted at the end of 2023. Beautiful. The perfect New Year's gift to your customers. So, the final verdict for public image is for sale. Criminal activity is okay if deemed profitable. The customer is always stupid, and never take accountability is, of course, a terminal diagnosis. These guys are terminally brain rotted. And we're only on point 1. Let's go to point 2. Oh wait, my bad. We're not done here. In this one action, Sony displayed an egregious amount of corporate brain rot. Quite impressive, to be honest. I mean, fucking 2 million people over and still keeping them as customers is quite impressive. Did you guys learn from Disney? Yes. In fact, they did. I didn't. That was supposed to be a one-off joke, but the truth is actually they did quite literally learn from Disney. Let's go into that. Ravi Ahuja, Sony Pictures, ET CEO. I can't remember what that was supposed to be, so yeah. They were a former Disney Television CFO and president of business operations. Garth Burkhard, Sony Pictures Animation SVP, Senior Vice President, formerly on Disney's PR team. Jay Levine, Sony Pictures, ET was entertainment, right, Sony Pictures Entertainment. EVP, Chief Strategy Officer of Business Operations. Levine worked at the Walt Disney Company in its corporate strategy and business development group. Now we can get into number 2. Sudden union busting tactics and behaviors. You know how I feel about union busters. In September 2022, just 13 months after Sony's acquisition, Crunchyroll approached Kyle McCarley about returning to voice the lead role in Mob Psycho 100 Season 3. Truly, the anime community rejoiced at this news because Mob Psycho 100 is massive. He was happy to return to the role, but had a major concern about his contract. It wasn't the money. They were willing to pay him the fees he was still making before the merger with the union. What he wanted was them to meet and have a conversation with the union directors about reinstating their contracts. He wasn't asking for a signed agreement or even a promise to meet with them, just that they would consider doing so. They refused and replaced him in response. Reportedly, he is not the only one to have something like this happen to him, but he is the most famous example. Now, why would they do this? Why would they refuse to talk with the union if salaries weren't the issue? It's simpler than you'd first imagine. Maternity leave is a scam. Who remembers this, huh? Number 45, 46, and 47 are the diagnostics we're going over for this one. So, for maternity leave is a scam, and those of you unfamiliar, it is not strictly about maternity leave, but rather it's about the actual benefits. Primarily the simplest ones. Basic things like health insurance, with which our entire structure of society was built around. So the reason that Crunchyroll and Sony executives refused to meet with the former union was because if they entertained the idea of working with them, they could be pressured into re-signing the contracts. Because refusing them would be officially terminating union contracts, whereas if they ignored them, they could just silently dissolve with the merger. And they don't want to re-sign is because they'd have to pay for benefits. Number 46 and 47, unions are evil and union busting is not a game, it is a life or death sport. Replacing a voice actor may not sound like a whole lot to people who aren't really interested in anime. But Mob Psycho 100 was not just incredibly popular, but critically acclaimed. Personally, never seen it, but I know its reputation. So imagine if in The Good Place, for example, they replaced Michael or Jason's actors in the final season, or whatever generic clone of hospital, lawyer, or detective dramas that you guys are enjoying today. Voice acting is an incredibly important part to the anime industry, and all voices are distinctive once you familiarize yourself with them, not to mention the quality of their performance. So, our final verdict for sudden union busting and tactics and behaviors is medium or high. Personally, you guys could have done worse, but hey, you didn't kill anybody this time. That comes later. Post-merger management are out of touch and dismissive of anime as a product. Now this one is a bit complicated of a diagnosis. It's quite close to number 49, the less a person understands their job, the better. But that one was primarily focused on experience and competence rather than understanding the product. I'm rather disappointed in myself for forgetting to account for employing people who hate the product. And I guess it's because I was more focused on executives and management rather than the mindset of employees and didn't fathom a scenario like this. Because I'm not retarded that way, I'm built different. But seriously, what motherfuckers buy out a company, then lay off all the management and executives so that they can replace them with their own people who are vocally judgmental and dismissive of the product that they're selling? Who does that? Sony does. Sony does that. So I will have to reveal a brand new point from their extended corporate brain rot list. Welcome to number 54, employing workers in management who hate your product. Here we are. Number 37, never listen to the young employees. Number 42, a culture is a dollar sign, especially if you don't understand it. And number 54, employing workers in management who hate your product, which is a symptom of ranking of very high. Oh, and don't worry, it doesn't end here. Because at the very beginning of this presentation, I spoke on how surprised I was at Sony's early investment into anime. Truly, really a surprising development that while I was writing this, I was actually willing to admit a little bit of respect for them for their foresight into how it would blow up someday. But now that I'm putting the finishing touches on this presentation, bitter and burnt out, I had an epiphany and had to come back to add this little bit of segment at the very end here. You stupid motherfuckers invested into it years ago. How long has it been? Must be about 30 years ago since you founded that studio. So your executives clearly thought it was a good investment. Then you buy out a studio, replace everybody there with people who are dismissive of its viability as a product. Then why in the name of dumbass suckfuckery did you make the investment in the first place? For sure, there is a leniency to be made about the time gap between then and now. But it is one thing to be a whole company that thinks it's stupid when buying and staffing it with your own people. It is another to have people at the board who believed in it and then handpicked self-righteous retards who wanted nothing to do with it. Yeah, we're bumping this up to terminal, by the way. Here we go. Slashing budgets for translation and subtitles. Removed all oversight. After the acquisition and replacing the executives and the management team at Crunchyroll, they did an audit of their expenses and determined that they were just spending too much on making subtitles readable. I mean, who really needs to read subtitles when they're listening to something in a different language? It's not necessary. Ask anybody who watches anime. Do you really read the subtitles when you're listening to it in Japanese and don't understand the language? I don't think so. I don't think anybody really does that. Naturally, it did take some time for audiences to notice. There was some conversation and complaints online from individuals who could tell the difference. But it didn't really hit mainstream consciousness until 2024, as all of these complaints started stacking on top of each other. From translation quality, typesetting not just being unappealing, but also, quote, aren't just inconvenient, but illegible, end quote, and the removal entirely for closed captions on the dubbed shows as well. This exploded after fans discovered that ChatGPT was currently being used for subtitles, and Crunchyroll's partnership with an Israeli AI company for future subs. Here we go. Sony and Crunchyroll damaged their reputation with this decision. Simply cutting the budget didn't do a whole lot of damage, but it was the lack of oversight that really started to take its toll. But more on that later. The death of the you need to spend money to make money philosophy, Crunchyroll was already determined to be profitable enough to buy out and replace Funimation with. But that wasn't enough for them. They decided that they needed to immediately cut costs as well, despite its overwhelming success, which leads us to The margins matter more than profits. Already self-explanatory from the previous point. And the customer is always stupid. They expected users to not notice the difference in quality or not care. Both apply and are condemnable. Our final verdict: this is a very high symptom of corporate brain rot. Cutting merchandise and eliminating racier adult manga and toys from sale entirely. In August 2022, Crunchyroll Sony bought a major anime merchandise retailer. Sounds like a great move on their part, since nearly all the profitability of anime comes from merchandise. Fun fact, most anime only make back 40 to 70% of their investment through TV advertising alone. Many, in fact, don't break even at all. So while Crunchyroll may have already been profitable, taking over the merchandise market was a great move strategically for numerous reasons. So what did they do wrong? Oh, that's a beautiful question you're asking right there. If I may redirect your attention to the top of the slide, they pulled a visa. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, you will soon. Given the information you just learned, let's open up a thought experiment for a moment. What do you think sells the best? I have no fucking clue, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that racy manga and merchandise, along with explicit merch, sell incredibly well. They bought the company only to give it the Skype treatment. If you don't know what that means, you will soon. So, for starters, we have self-destructive PR priorities on this one. Crunchyroll spent an unfathomable amount of money buying a beloved company they considered a brand risk. Then they neutered it and gutted it for parts to add it as a storefront to its already unstable website and app. I shit you not, that's what they did. And that is the Skype treatment. You see, when Microsoft bought Skype, they made Skype unusable. Until eventually people didn't care anymore when they gutted it for parts to make Microsoft Teams. That is the Skype treatment. And number 42, a culture is a dollar sign, especially if you don't understand it. Anime culture is a popular term, so it counts as far as I'm concerned. Plus, I wanted more than one symptom on this. Not saying it is necessary, but it is... One unavoidable part of the culture is the racier parts of it. Not saying it's necessary, but it is a part of it, and trying to invest into this industry without accepting that is ludicrous. Our final designation, our final verdict, this is a very high symptom of corporate brain rot. Also, you shouldn't be posturing as safe for work when you have this in your library. Just take a moment. Really appreciate the head page for panty and stocking with garter belt. Obscene angels who are banished from the pearly gates for being foul-mouthed, sex-crazed, sugar-addicted bad girls, including nudity, profanity, slurs, smoking, sexual content, and violence. But hey, I mean, it's not like they're pretending to be safe for work, right? I mean, this clearly isn't a brand risk as much as selling racy manga, right? Speaking of that, pretending to care is more important than caring. Remember that? So, ruining the user interface to pad engagement by wasting customers' time. Admittedly, I don't have proof of this one. However, I have seen it before with other websites. Engagement is a stupid priority. I should add it to the list, but not right now. This can already qualify as corporate brain rot on its own merits, but there are a few points we can attribute to it. Number 2, public images for sale, of course. The user interface is one of the most important features of any website, especially one that demands money for easily piratable content. However, engagement is a measure of success for streaming services. That success can be leveraged for investments and manipulated for results in quarterly reports. So, that leads us to number 23, outwardly lying to investors is always acceptable. Artificially padding engagement numbers by worsening the user experience, thus pushing people off so that they can show to investors and higher-ups engagement over subscribers or revenue, which is an inherent lie. It's like Ubisoft using players instead of sales when reporting their success. Final designation, final verdict, very high. Just a disclaimer, I know all these verdicts except for one have been very high so far, but there's a simple reason for that. All of these actions aren't just a single behavior, but a blend of bullshit and suckfuckery made with the intention to create the perfect concoction of corporate brain rot and retardation. I am becoming more powerful than any hate tuber has ever dreamed of. The idiotic inanity of this dull, futile lunacy that they call business fuels my bait and expostulate diatribes. It makes my mind go Super Saiyan, my creative energy volatile and eruptive, my hatred insurrectionary. I can feel my power growing the further I get into this presentation. Soon I will surpass my limits and may even find out I have a long-lost twin brother named Mario Mangione. Oh, hey man, how you doing? Yeah, okay, fine, I'll calm down. Stop looking at me like that. Implementing cheap and faulty AI or third-party services to replace staff. I don't condemn companies for investing into AI. AI is useful. I use it myself for smaller but complex times that I don't have the time or skill set to do myself. Unlike other companies, though, their attempts to use AI or outsource work can actually be reasonably implemented. But these stupid motherfuckers didn't just use AI, they used the cheapest AI they could and repeatedly outsourced work to people who couldn't be bothered to do the bare fucking minimum. But because they worked for cheaper than actual staff, they kept using them. Quality be damned, art be damned, customers be damned, employees be damned. Number 2. Public image is for sale. We're here yet again. These people really don't give two shits about their reputation anymore, do they? Why should I be bothered at this point? You deliver a shitty product and receive a shitty reputation. But hey, you saved a couple bucks, right? They traded reputation, aka public image, for money. Number 17. Expenses be damned, we need to withhold as much money as we can for ourselves. Number 38. Margins matter more than profits. Regardless of their business viability, they needed to improve their profit margins by reducing expenses to retain profit. You may be wondering where they sacrifice profits. Simply put, reputation has a hold on business. That's what keeps companies in line in a free market. Simply put, reputation has a hold on business. That's what... Oh, wait. At least it's supposed to. Unfortunately, it seems you can buy reputation today. But the more they ruin their reputation with terrible quality, a toxic workplace, and AI scandals, the more they need to spend on marketing themselves to the public. Naturally, that begs the question of how they improve their margins if they need to compensate for the scandals. That's an excellent question. Marketing budgets can be easily written off as proof of expansion. So while they spend more year after year on marketing to brainwash the public through cheaping out everywhere else, improved margins where they mattered most. Which leads us neatly to a subsymptom. Outwardly lying to investors is always acceptable. Claiming that their expanding market budget is a sign of growth instead of consequences of their skimming money is a flagrant lie. And I couldn't fit this in earlier. Fuck your rent, Fuck your mortgage and fuck your newborn child. Our publicly traded rulers need money to give to their stockbroker overlords. Bitch! So, final verdict is very high. Probably more I could attribute to this, but we're moving on. My voice hurts. You'd think this would be simple, right? Employing and backing toxic staff? You'd think that there would only be 1 or 2 examples of different toxic behavior, right? No way that this could somehow be the longest fucking thing that I would need to talk about tonight, right? Right? Fun fact, all of these stories broke at least a year, most more, after Sony replaced Crunchyroll management with their own. Jamie Marchi was pulled in from the Funimation merger. What I could find, Amy had no prior association with Crunchyroll before it. I could have missed something though. I'd like to remind you that I'm making this in less than 2 weeks during the Christmas holidays with family over and juggling other projects simultaneously in the background. And it took nearly 2 whole months of uninterrupted work to do corporate brain rot presentation. Also, we're crammed for time, and we've already talked about these other things or these other incidents. No, we haven't, or eventually will. So we're focusing on Jamie right now. But yeah, no, we'll cover all those other incidents in the future. Yeah. Jamie Marchi was and still is a nobody with a superiority complex the size of an extra large order from the Heart Attack Grill. I could spend an hour on her bullshit alone, but I don't have the time or wherewithal to do that. There are plenty of other people who have talked about her nonsense. I highly recommend checking all of her bullshit out on YouTube. Just look up Jamie Marchi Scandal or Jamie Marchi Crunchyroll or whatever the fuck you want to put into YouTube. You'll find dozens of results, all of them at least 20 minutes long, with multiple videos in the series. She's an anime localizer and voice actress who started her career in 2000, how fitting, with Funimation as a freelance actress and has seemingly stuck with them since then all the way through to the Crunchyroll merger, probably because no other company was willing to put up with her. She became most famous for her work in Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Mage, which came out in 2017. But the drama about it truly ballooned and popped in 2023 and 2024, with her taking to the internet to attack, harass, and insult anybody who questioned her decisions and choices on not just that project, but many more. I won't beat a dead localizer here and go into excruciating detail. Not because I'm above that, but because she's still employed there, hence the title of this segment. But she didn't just stick to online. In a fan meet and greet, a lovely young man came up to her panel and asked her a question. I'll just play the clip here.
It's a stroll of power, and I appreciate it.
Well, I'm kind of scared to ask this question now because I don't want to bring down the room. So
okay.
This is more directed at Jamie, but all of you can answer.
Go,
All of
Jamie,
you
go. I'm
have,
excited
like,
about it. I'm ready to bring
input
down
on
the
this.
room. Let's do
We
it.
need a spotlight.
So
on
Funimation
Jamie.
has come under, let's call it, criticism for how they choose to adapt their scripts for
like
a couple of
unnecessary
shows.
hate. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and a lot of that I feel is directed at you unfairly.
Thank you.
So how would you like to respond to that kind of criticism?
To the
particularly-
criticism, like, I have a vagina. Deal with it. Like, it's honestly, that's the truth. I am a woman. I am a funny woman. We are all talented, funny, powerful women. We are out here. It's going to happen. Deal with it. I'm sorry you're not getting laid. It's not about you. Move on. That's my reaction.
All right.
It's fascinating in how the face of all these layoffs, you truly do always manage to keep the right people on board, don't you, Sony? Cal McCarty was just too much of a risk, but someone daring to ask her online, what made you make that decision for the change? Being met with, you're a virgin, get a life, is totally acceptable. So obviously we got the customer is always stupid here. Clearly Jamie speaks for the whole team as made evident by that last clip there, and her continuing to work with them in more than one high profile role with Mr. Crunchyroll since she broke containment in 2023 and has continued to rampage since, mixed with multiple other reports we either have already covered or will soon be covering, signifies that she represents the company's attitude as well. I was hoping to do a little bit about me upgrading the tier specifically for the egregiousness of her attitude, but it's already at the highest level, terminal. Workers' rights do not exist. The managers harass the employees. They shouldn't be doing that. Is Sony really that desperate to be Microsoft? There are better ways to do that. Hiring hated public figures. Look at how obnoxious that lady is. And I haven't even touched on 1% of that nonsense. I'd strongly suggest looking into it yourself sometime. Symptom of employing and backing toxic staff has been deemed terminal. I won't share the name of who came forward for their own privacy. This is targeted hostility and harassment of employees with anxiety or depression. A former senior software engineer with Crunchyroll came forward with his diagnosis of anxiety and severe depression after a difficult year on top of taking care of his terminally ill mother, something I can relate to. He requested accommodations at work under the Americans with Disabilities Act and was met with harassment and ostracization, something I can also relate to, although my requests were physical in nature. After mounting harassment and receiving the middle finger during a work call from a random manager, he reported it to HR. Shocking literally nobody, no action was taken and the harassment intensified until he was inevitably fired for an undisclosed policy violation. Now obviously this is rather reminiscent of number 16, incapable of admitting wrongdoings and mistakes. Brought to you by a former company I worked at where I received management training and they told me to never tell the employees why they were being fired. Something I thought was stupid and dystopian, but that doesn't matter right now. We're talking about Crunchyroll, Sony, and then we'll get on to Sony, and then we'll get on to why we're all here tonight. So here it is. Here's the paragraph. To draw straight from the material I was trained on, companies will refuse to give employees an explanation or grounds for their firing because it could be used against them in a wrongful termination lawsuit, even if they had rightful cause to fire them. So allegedly, Crunchyroll offered him a severance package during his termination under the condition he kept quiet about his treatment at the company. Thankfully, he told them to shove it up their ass. Shove it up their ugly ass. Because it's subtle, you know. Really, really subtle about the fact of why they were firing him. He is not the first employee to come forward with his stories of abuse or harassment at Crunchyroll, but he is one of the most recent and offers the second most clarity, the foremost being David Wald, who we will cover in more detail later. So, as mentioned before, we had incapable of admitting wrongdoing and mistakes, but actually it doesn't really apply. Not because they didn't do anything wrong, but they didn't refuse to tell him why they were firing him because they were afraid of a lawsuit. They fired him because they didn't want to be sued. Actually, that in retrospect, that probably should have applied. I should have counted that, but doesn't matter. They're already getting the maximum sentence anyways. Could this still apply? Actually, like I just mentioned, yeah, actually, it probably should have. But that would have involved more work, and despite my crash out earlier, I had just woken up and am now tired. We can still give them shit without it. Insert extremely tired yawn here. Actually, I actually really do need to yawn. Well, that's actually rather mild to most of mine. Let's move on. So, actually what we're doing here is self-destructive PR priorities. Abusive managers? Nah, man. The senior developer with profound depression and a terminally ill mother is the dangerous one here. They made like my mother when sending my dog to the farm, treating the symptom rather than the disease. Honestly, I have to thank Crunchyroll. I joked about it earlier, but they truly have inspired me. They're showing me all the corporate brain rot I missed in my first go-around. I thought I had figured out every possible example and was needlessly padding the numbers, but no, Crunchyroll is a shining tower of brain rot-induced retardation. Who could have fathomed that? Number 19. Convenience is a better truth than reality. Much like with everything else, Crunchyroll is sticking its head in the sand like an ostrich, pretending this doesn't exist. But there is a key difference between ostriches and Crunchyroll. Is that we like ostriches. They're a pretty cool fucking bird. I would like to be kicked by an ostrich someday. Our hero will either knock some life into or out of you. Seeing that after extensive testing, the world and I have proven that I can't experience the latter, let's knock some life into me. The other difference between the ostrich and Crunchyroll is that ostriches don't actually stick their head in the sand. That's a myth. So Crunchyroll and friends are the only ones doing this and are making themselves look like fools. And I love that. I'll just leave it up there for a moment for you to appreciate. Let's continue. Pecking order of responsibility. Number 25. While they did not fulfill the prophecy all the way to zero, Crunchyroll did execute several stages of number 25. They started by ignoring his request for disability assistance. Then they tried gaslighting and ostracization, which evolved into harassment. Then they tried to manipulate him by firing him and skipped step C straight to combo it with D, a bribe, leveraging his mother's illness with a severance package in exchange for silence. And here we go, number 27, workers' rights do not exist. Ignoring the harassment and financial abuse, they literally ignored his workers' rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Simple as that. Bezos called, he's very proud of you. Discrimination is A-okay if they can't prove it. Ignoring it is the same as not being provable, right? Oh, well, isn't that fun? Thoughts and prayers. And do I really need to explain this one? Number 32, employees are objects when beneath you. No, I do not. So, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 symptoms of corporate brain rot here, adding up to a final verdict of brain rot. If this story of brain rot was a drug, it would be Walter White's blue meth. Aggressive DMCA escalation against piracy. This is actually tied to a big reveal we're building up to, but for now, we will stay here in anime hell. Kill me! I think I'm losing my mind as I'm writing this. You know who else has lost their minds? Crunchyroll, for offering the worst quality possible at rates that would make Netflix blush. Okay, maybe they're not that bad, but they are by far the most aggressive with their DMCAs than any company I've ever seen, rivaling that of Nintendo. Yes, that one I'm serious about, but again, that's spoilers. According to a Google Transparency Report analysis, and reporting by CBR and others, Crunchyroll and Funimation content has been cited in over 45 million copyright takedown requests sent to Google across pirate websites and online repositories. 37 of those million were from Funimation and another 8 from Crunchyroll. Would anyone like to wager a guess as to what time period most of those 8 million came from? Now, under normal circumstances, protecting your IP isn't necessarily a bad thing. But DMCA uses up fan goodwill. Even people who weren't pirating the content view it as petty, among other things. Crunchyroll as a company is also not one to talk, as it was a piracy website itself. Until 2009, Crunchyroll had been a website meant for pirating anime. It wasn't until then that they began the transition into a legitimate business. They were able to become so successful as a legitimate business in spite of their bad reputation thanks to their audience. They leveraged their viewer-based analytics to secure licensing deals that they never would have gotten otherwise, creating a hilarious statement. Crunchyroll laundered a piracy audience into legitimacy. Now, obviously, leadership has changed since then, but it is still funny to point and laugh at, so everybody come and join me in laughing at them. So, let's dismiss this one and go to the actual number 10 pick. Sony Crunchyroll directly sold users' personal viewing data to Facebook. This one is as open and shut as it gets, honestly, which is why I originally passed on adding it to the list of brain rot to dissect. But quick and easy is what we need right now. What better first impression can you make than immediately taking over a company and selling out all of their customers for some quick bucks? What else could have helped them make their money back as quick as possible? I mean, really, did they have any other options? It's not like they racked up the prices to a nearly criminal degree, and I do mean criminal. Any higher, and there are numerous agencies that could have drawn the attention of. It's not like they started laying off their staff en masse and paid extra attention to target staff in poor mental and physical health. It's not like they deleted millions of dollars of user content, forcing them to repurchase it all. Hold up. They did do all that. This one was of the first of many steps towards Crunchyroll's horrible reputation today. Frankly, with its position in the anime community, it should have, by my estimate, 20 to 30% more subscribers than the current estimates do. That's just by not doing all of the suck fuckery, by the way. Of course, we're talking about number 2 public images for sale. Can you fathom how much money that would be? 20 to 30% more subscribers than they do out of millions of subscribers that they currently have? But Sony is like an OnlyFans whore in how it weighs consequences to actions. Sure, my reputation is forever ruined, but I made a lot of easy money. It's not like they didn't know that they'd get caught, but they knew that it would never come close to how much they made. Actually, I nearly forgot. Sony's been doing this for decades. They probably got overconfident with it, which is also why they got caught so fast. It would also explain why Sony's data selling MO started getting used 2 years later. If you think I'm being too critical, the PlayStation Network has data breaches nearly every fucking year. Apple has them twice a year. I know that because when I use an iPhone, I get notifications telling me to change my password every 6 months because a, quote, data breach occurred and your passwords were compromised, end quote. Sure, that was what was going on there. Number 26, criminal activity is encouraged if deemed profitable. We really need to update these laws, folks. Real enforcement. In Canada, it would be difficult, but America has executive orders. Give me 48 hours of unrestricted research into these companies, and I'll have an ironclad executive order ready to go that could pass as an official bill, honestly. Save countless taxpayer dollars in future cases, and probably depress any future attempts like this. After making a couple of examples out of a few rule breakers, of course. Preferably, I'd like to outlaw those kinds of institutions altogether, as that would be the most effective way to prevent it. Just outlaw data brokering altogether. But I can understand the complexity behind doing that. It'd be way too much work. Number 33, of course, that's here too. If you can't understand why this applies, how the fuck did he make it this far? Have you ever been paying attention? Have you even been paying attention? Okay, enough ragging on you. Sony treated their customers as expendable fools, assuming that nobody would notice or care about their privacy being violated. They treated their customers as resources to be used how they wish. Number 43, short-term profits are king. As laid out earlier, if Sony stopped fucking around with Crunchyroll, they would find out the value of acquiring a company with pristine reputation and a dedicated fan base. But the returns needed to be as immediate as possible to justify the purchase to their brain-red retards at Wall Street so the CEO can get his annual bonus. And number 21, enough is never enough. This symptom could have applied to half of the brain rot we're discussing today, so I kept it exempt from the records. But seeing how this factors in perfectly with this topic, I feel it applies. I've also bumped it up to high. So, we got number 2, 21, 26, 33, and 43 for a final verdict of this symptom is terminal. Crunchyroll's original anime, X-Arm. This may not be corporate brain rot, but is undoubtedly the worst thing I've ever laid eyes on. And I have watched the Snow White remake, One Punch Man Season 2, Noreen, Arlie Ferretta, Nakaimo, and have been subjected to far too many fucking Hallmark movies. I actually found enjoyment in some of these, actually. Like Snow White remake, that was decent enough. Princess Problems was a great original song that was hilarious to listen to. Noreen was pretty fun for a while. Ari Ferretta was interesting enough. Nakaimo, I actually unironically enjoyed. I think Nakaimo is great. And Hallmark movies, I've actually seen one good Hallmark movie and tolerated other ones. But X-Arm, god fucking damn, that's a masterclass in sucking every ounce of joy or intrigue to be had in something. Normally I can enjoy bad media. I have fun with yelling at it and imagining how I would have done it instead to make it better. But with this abomination, even the inherent premise was awful. Could it have been done well? Maybe. I've seen it before with Quintessential Quintuplets and Data Live. But you know what those shows had that this didn't? Budget. And I don't mean the funny way Freakazoid means it either, although there's also no contest there. Whoever greenlit this experiment had no faith in it. On my baby sisters putting on the Illumination Grinch movie, I have been reminded that there are worse things in life. At least X-Arm can be analyzed as a case of study of monumental failure. That movie is truly devoid of life and intrigue. I will never hold Benedict Cumberbatch in the same regard again. Back to the budget discussion. Whoever greenlit this experiment had zero faith in it. And that's what it was. It was literally an experiment. What kind of experiment? God if I fucking know. There were several reasons, but the only one I remembered was that they got a live-action movie director behind the project because it sounded interesting. The only reason I remember that is because I also thought it could have been an interesting idea with money and oversight or cooperation with somebody who knew about animation. But like I said, no faith and no budget. So why make it? I have a theory. I thought the real idea here was to test the limits of a minimum viable product in anime. Because as we discussed earlier, the new executives couldn't understand anime. Unfortunately, this was conceived, greenlit, and hit markets long before Sony had any control over the company. In spite of my best efforts, I could not blame them for this abomination. Final verdict, it doesn't fucking function. They also made High Guardian Spice? No, they didn't. They did not make High Guardian. No. No, 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 no. Fuck! What the fuck was going on over there? Jesus Christ! What the fuck, Crunchyroll? Oh, God. No. I thought this was some indie abomination. Made by some... Why? How? This is the first Crunchyroll anime I've ever seen to get a score under 4. Like, seriously, everything on Crunchyroll gets at least a 4 out of 5. This is a 1.6. Holy shit! Okay. Okay. Moving on. We're moving on. Ending the free subscription tier. While I would like to commend them for being the first company in history to give up ad revenue, I've seen this cycle before and I'm sure all of you are smart enough to figure it out. It would give me no greater joy in life to write out exactly how this will go down over the next 5 years in explicit detail. Truly get down into the most minute details and biggest, most explosive results that will light the internet and community on fire for 48 hours because nobody has an attention span longer than that anymore. So that I can point out and tell everybody how right I was each time it happened. But just like Microsoft and their budget cuts, I have to cut this up. If anyone wants a 100-point presentation on this, at me on Twitter. Ultimately, this is an attempt to raise prices and start enacting rent-seeking protocols. On its own, removing the subscription tier is nowhere near corporate brain rot levels. As mentioned, I might even call it commendable. But I know this company. I know what they're planning. And I'm outside their house right now watching their every move. And someday soon, I'll show up on them ready to say,
Surprise,
and
motherfucker.
prove myself right. What can I assign to it right now? Easy. Number 33 is customer is always stupid is an easy diagnosis. Pecking order of responsibility, not that they checked off the list, but being so predictable, so only half marks on that one. And number 2, public images for sale, if we want to really think about it. They are trading a lot of loyal viewers to try and force some of them to pay for the subscription tier. They are literally selling a chunk of their viewer base. Final verdict? High. This symptom, ending the free subscription tier, is high. Canceling community outreach without telling former partners and beneficiaries. Crunchyroll used to run numerous outreach programs and campaigns, from brand ambassadors, college club sponsorships, fan creator spotlights, and community moderation teams that upheld their own autonomy, to convention programs focused on education about the industry and the people who work within it, rather than self-promotion. They also ran panels discussing mental health, point out the irony, and charity collaborations. After the takeover in 2021, Sony ran an expense report and starting in 2022 began quietly ending all of these, one after another until 2023, or through 2023, my bad. They burned the community outreach programs like the Library of Alexandria, ambassador programs, college sponsorships, community staff, and fan creation highlights. And of course the mental programs, health programs needed to go. They took those out behind the barn and old yellered those bastards. By 2024, the only remaining programs were strictly business and promotional. Anything fan-oriented was meticulously controlled, making the process and experience so miserable, several shut themselves down voluntarily. A lot of corporate brain rot could apply here. Margins over profit, enough is never enough, and so on. But this is just standardized greed at this point. They're not even getting interesting with it. You see, we have an extra special diagnostics to run here. For starters, how small-minded are you fools? At least Nintendo doesn't give fans a false hope. They're consistent with their overreach and controlling nature. But you guys, you made any fan event so miserable for fear of brand risks that you sucked all the joy out of them until they gave up on their own. Not to mention sucking all the fun out of your official events. And what about those clubs? Such disappointment.
You. I know. You're a fucking disappointment.
And then Kagura, their hot mascot, Hime. For those of you unaware, that means that the figure remains, but is ultimately inactive and or absent more than 90% of the time. And shockingly, or rather unsurprising if you're at all familiar with these companies, the only cutbacks they didn't make with their charity and outreach programs was to the LGBTQ plus activism, because pretending to care is more important than caring. Sure, they're not making another High Guardian Spice, apparently, but they've been doing donations, panels, and even added an internal Pride and LGBTQ employee support group, because supporting gayness in the office is significantly cheaper and more important than someone with legitimately threatening mental health problems. A culture is a dollar sign. As established earlier, anime culture applies to this discussion. Micromanaging fan events, shutting down support for fan creators and employees, removing autonomous community moderation teams, and ceasing community engagement as a whole. Without a thick line drawn between company and consumer, devalues the community that had been cultivated. The anime community is one of, if not the most talented, passionate, and loyal communities in the world, and I do mean that. Crunchyroll would never have become a legitimate business without that loyalty. Anime never would have evolved like it has without that passion. A whole genre of music, an entire medium of streaming and content creation would not have existed without them. And not to mention the thousands of talented artists, storytellers, and other activities that the fans engage in that the community engagement helped cultivate. Despite being a niche or ridiculous market, the community support amounts to $30 billion annually across all areas. That's more than the global music and comic industries put together, and nearly rivals the global box office at an estimated $40 billion. You could easily argue that no community puts as much money into their hobby as anime fans do. They love putting money, their money, into the industry to keep it flowing and to help create new things. But hey, why would the biggest platform in anime want to keep that love that made it so famous? A smart man would have easily found ways to further monetize that love and support while simultaneously nurturing it. And a dumb man would try to become anime Netflix. Guess what they went with? Terminal. Let's move the fuck on. Routine, massive layoffs in spite of rising profits. We made it. Are you still awake? You'd better be. We're almost finished with Crunchyroll. Just got this one left. And this one will be quick because it's basically word for word what I wrote in my original presentation. So let's just read off what I wrote in the original, shall we? Employees are objects when beneath you, and numbers when you don't oversee them. Brought to you by Xbox. Cutting down on wasteful expenses and unnecessary employees is a good thing in a company. You shouldn't have anyone there that does not serve a purpose. Leeches are not a good thing. Firing entirely profitable studios to cut yourself a bigger bonus is evil. Bankrupting thousands of individuals and hundreds of families without cause is completely unjustifiable. The only causes behind such an egregious decision would be either narcissism and sociopathy, or corporate brain rot in the form of identifying people as numbers and objects. You could argue both are the same thing, but just like then I was then, and I am now, I'm too tired to debate you. Let's move on. There we go! Don't forget it, kids. A simple moral lesson. Don't be a dick! You should be growing your company, not shrinking. Stop! You keep laying everyone off to boost your numbers so that you look good to your stockbroker overlords. You're lying to the investors. Stop it. You promise investors, your employees, and the public growth, and you can't even afford to keep your own employees? Sad. Our final verdict here is very high. So, here we are. We're finally done Crunchyroll. We're back to Sony. My God, how the hell did they fuck that up so badly? Oh God. Earlier I said we would retouch on the 6th general sin of Sony's. Are you ready? Having over 1,600 subsidiary companies. Fuck you guys, that is too much. And so, here we are. Just so you know, all of that was just Crunchyroll. Starting 4 years ago. Out of 26 years and 1,600 subsidiary companies. 1,795 if you want to include affiliated companies. I'm not joking. This was pulled directly from the SEC archives. As of September 30th, 2023, the company had 1,642 subsidiaries and 153 affiliated companies. Actually, on second thought, fuck this. You can't make me do all these. I do this as a hobby. I'd like to have a life, a job. This Sony bullshit likely won't even be relevant anymore by release anyways. I don't know how to transition out of this, so let's just start talking about their dog shit products. Sony Smart TVs, PlayStation Portal, BMG audio CDs, Sony Connect, blah, 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 blah. And this isn't even all of it. Here we go. Here are their movies and TV shows and their network bullshit. All that failed or were terribly received. And here's their video games. We got Killzone, Lair, Mag, Gran Turismo 5, 7, Sports, SOCOM 4, Beyond Two Souls, Drive Club, No Man's Sky, The Last of Us 2, Destruction All-Stars, Firewall Ultra, Helldivers 2, if you know, you know. My God, I'm throwing my hands everywhere as if my camera's on. I really need to get around to a face reveal at some point. And last but not least, Concord. Come on. Give us the budget sheet already, Sony. Let us take a fucking look. And all of that isn't even including their pre-2000s failures, like the 32X. Obviously, we need to talk about how Sony operates as a company. Most importantly, of course, their corporate brain rot, as this is Corporate Brain Rot Sony Edition. And that is my self-proclaimed duty. Sony has received complaints and been under fire many times for a variety of reasons, which gives me plenty to work with. Shall we list some off? Here we go. Poor internal coordination, siloed divisions, bureaucracy-heavy, inconsistent strategy and priorities, anti-union, overwork culture, harassment and discrimination, unnecessary layoffs, pricing and monetization, Sony tone-deaf interviews, contradictory public statements, over-promising and ignoring investors. What the fuck is wrong with you, Sony? What the fuck is wrong with you? Why? So for poor internal coordination and siloed divisions, we've got overstaffed bureaucratic roles with starving front lines, and bureaucracy is king. Sony is frequently criticized for operating as a semi-independent kingdoms. Sony Music, Sony Pictures, PlayStation, Sony Financial Group, and Shohoku College. That's right, they own a college. They own a university. It's terrifying to think about that these retards are teaching the next generation, but that's a story for another day. This leads to internal confusion, slow decision-making, and missed or wasted opportunities for cross-media collaborations due to copyright and IP differences. While there are some benefits to their branch models, they have evidently not been managed well. Next up, we have, for bureaucracy heavy, we have company rules are unchangeable, more immutable than the Ten Commandments, and of course, bureaucracy is king again. Much like the problem with their siloed divisions, this is a problem with too much internal bureaucracy amidst these branches. Former executives and analysts have described Sony as risk-averse and process-heavy, especially compared to Apple, Netflix, or Nintendo. But you know what? At least that means they're not committing number 7, investing everything into high-risk projects that could bankrupt your company. At least they're above that. Thank God, because can you imagine if we were dealing with both of those bullshit? Their over-reliance on middle management and having multiple layers of oversight for every project stifles creative ingenuity within the company, depresses progress, and drags the simplest of projects or decisions to a halt. A fantastic example of this being a 3-month transitional period taking 2.5 years to finalize. Also, they're extremely fixated on rules and procedure, even by Japan standards. Here we go. We got a big one coming up, so hold on for a second while I grab some more water. My throat is on fire! Okay, I'm back. Inconsistent strategy and priorities. We got a long list here. We have stocks and shareholders are the most important people on the planet. Overstaffed bureaucratic roles with starving front lines, corporate HR speak, incapable of admitting wrongdoings and mistakes, outwardly lying to investors, bureaucracy is king, all problems should be ignored, and never taking accountability. This is going to be a fun one. Sony, are you okay? You need to talk to someone. A big sign of mental health problems is fluctuating plans and interests. Something you guys have in such excess that you make me look healthy by comparison. 4 years ago, healthy by comparison. A famous example being One Sony, as mentioned above. The plan was to address the massive problem of the siloed divisions, improve efficiency and internal coordination. It was announced in 2012 under the, at the time, president and CEO, Kazuo Hirai. This man understood the vision, so making an exception to the no callouts rule for this presentation. Yes, we also did it for Jamie Marchi, but that was specifically talking about a toxic workplace and employees. So, what happened here? Unfortunately, the plan wound up being too monumental for him to take on under scrutiny from the boards, executives in each branch, and demanding stakeholders. So to satisfy them, he reprioritized other shorter and mid-term projects, which by 2015 basically froze all progress to a halt until he was booted out in 2018. Fantastic work, everyone. Glad you can't see any farther than your own wands between your legs. What else did you guys fuck up and or abandon in the past 26 years? Oh, fuck me. Here is a small list of the internal changes Sony has made and then canceled or changed in the past 26 years. The digital Dream Kids consumer electronics strategy from the early 2000s, unified proprietary Sony media ecosystem, full vertical integration of Sony electronics and content pre-One Sony era, One Sony synergy initiative scaled back and reinterpreted, that is not the same as the original One Sony project, aggressive in-house mobile phone expansion, broad consumer electronics dominant strategy, aggressive 3D entertainment push, Japan-centric global management structure, full first-party hardware focused, which was shifted to IP and services, and the live service viability. That is a small list of the strictly internal changes that they have canceled in 26 years, not even their full history as a company. How the fuck old is Sony? 1 second. Let me just confirm here. How old is Sony? 1946. Nearly 80 years old. Actually, 80 years old in a couple of days from now. And now here's a list of all their hardware plans PlayStation canceled in the past 26 years. PlayStation 3 cell processor. PlayStation Portable long-term support. The PlayStation Vita ecosystem. The Vita TV come PlayStation TV. The PlayStation Move mass market strategy. The dedicated PlayStation handheld successor. The PlayStation VR long-term first-party support. The PlayStation VR 2. The PlayStation hardware backward compatibility expansion plans. Great. And now for their software and services plans. PlayStation Home, PlayStation View, PlayStation All-Stars franchise continuation, Japan Studio as a full internal studio, numerous unannounced projects through studio closures. What does that mean? Oh, I'm glad you asked. That means that they had tons of original works or sequels or everything all on the back burners. Stuff created by their most talented artists before they set the building on fire so that they could keep a little more money for themselves at their end-of-year annual reports. Because creativity, art, and long-term viability be damned, our stockbroker overlords need their money. Live service, 10 games by 2026 plans were revised, delayed, and canceled numerous times. Player focus at certain studios was reversed, and PS3, Linux, other OS support. Oh, fucking hell, there's more? What the fuck was I thinking? What the fuck were they? God damn it. Sony Vaio PC business was sold off. The Sony Reader ebook ecosystem was canceled. The Sony proprietary ebook store was canceled. The memory stick as universal media format was canceled. The Sony Clear was canceled. Sony Xperia expansion into US flagship market. By the way, my friend in Indonesia wants one too. So can you ship one over to them? Sony Ericsson joint strategy venture was canceled. Sony tablet strategy was canceled. Sony smartwatch initiatives was canceled. Consumer robotics expansion. What? You were getting into robotics? Why would I ask such a stupid question? Of course they were. And of course, they were also planning on doing drones too. But they gave up on that too, just like every fucking thing else. And the PlayStation TV. They were going to make a PlayStation TV. I don't know if that's awful or awesome, but either way, we'll never find out, will we? All that and much, much more. We're not even touching on their TV and tech sales, music, movies, anime, financial services, partnerships and acquisitions, and internal or organizational plans either. Well, I mean, I guess we touched on some of those, but not all of them. Fucking hell, Sony, you need help. These people might need some help, and I'm willing to offer my services as an advisor if you're willing to pay the appropriate price. Think about it. I'm one smart motherfucker, and I'm pretty sure I know your company better than you guys do by now. Oh yeah, anti-union work culture. Yes, shocking literally everybody, this didn't end with Crunchyroll. Unsurprisingly, Sony doesn't like unions, so it makes this more relevant than any other company. Sony's insistence on fighting off unions had led to many extreme decisions that go beyond the many Crunchyroll scandals. They would rather rely on contractors for everything than put people into their actual employ so that they don't have enough employees to form a threatening union strike. There have also been there's also been a complaint from the CWA with the National Labor Relations Board against a Sony subsidiary company named Santa Monica Studio. Summary of that complaint included in the next slide. Do I have to read all this out? Yeah, I guess I do. This week, the Communications Workers of America filed an unfair labor practice charge with the National Relations Board against Santa Monica Studio, a Sony subsidiary based in Los Angeles, California, whatever the fuck, alleging that Sony Limited protected organizing activities on their property in violation of Section 7 of the NLRA. On November 21st, CWA members visited Sony video game studio locations throughout California and across the country to talk to Sony employees about the reasons a growing number of workers in the industry are forming unions. When workers arrived outside Santa Monica Studio, building management kicked members off of a public sidewalk facing the property and threatened to call the police. Sony's attempt to limit workers' right to distribute leaflets, a form of concerted activity, continues a pattern of low-road behavior from the industry giant amid recent Sony studio layoffs and growing disparities between Sony workers and leadership executives. In response to record layoffs in the video game industry, former Sony Computer Entertainment Europe president Chris Steering, what the fuck? Why is his title so long? Suggested that laid-off video games workers should drive an Uber or go to the beach for a year until the industry gets better. What a fucking sociopath. I'm so glad we talk about him later. Yeah, that's another instance of me breaking the we're not calling people out rule. Despite this, over 2,000 video game workers and over 5,000 tech workers in the United States have organized with CWA to fight for improvements to their workplaces, including protections against AI, limits to outsourcing. Good luck with that. Sony's more addicted to outsourcing work than a homeless person is to crack. Better work-life balance during crunch time, and higher wages and benefits. Workers at Sony who are interested in learning more about unions and their legal right to organize should visit code-cwa.org/organize. So, we got all that? Good. Overwork culture. This is going to be a fun one. Murder is fine as long as you can't be sued for it. Incapable of admitting wrongdoing and mistakes. Responsibility as a reward. Pretending to care is more important than caring. Workers' rights do not exist, and employees are numbers. We all ready for this? I'm not. I could and probably would have gone into extensive detail about the workplace culture, but we've discussed this at length. Instead, I'd like to talk about the story of a particular employee who would probably go otherwise forgotten by history. We all know Sony has already forgotten about him. On January 15th, 2018, a man died. I don't know his name because it was unfortunately not included in this report. I only know of what happened to him. Since the company did not use a formal time card system, because why would they? It makes it easier to track all those labor violations they love so much. The hours that led to his death had to be indirectly reconstructed by the Japanese Labor Authority. I am led to believe that this is one of the very rare publicly available documentations of these types of incidents. To reconstruct this case, I used these two links. The first being a PDF from the Corporate Human Rights Benchmark, where Sony earned a very impressive score. Truly, I mean, just take a look at this. A resounding 19 out of 100. And isn't it awesome, just the best part, that the highest thing they got a score in was a 6 out of 20? And the reason they got that score was because you get a point for responding. Meaning that the only points they got for remedies and grievance mechanisms was responding to the Corporate Human Rights Benchmark Association. truly just a wonderful company we're talking about here. Like, really. I mean, and this one right here is them talking about about their child labor accusations. See this right here? This one point? That's them responding to the allegation. And then zeros across the board on putting in policies to prevent it from happening in the future and appropriate action to make it stop. Just a wonderful company here, Sony is. That CHRB link is a veritable gold mine of human rights violations, including the child labor that I could have used and wish I had discovered earlier. But unfortunately, I have 2 days left to finish writing this, then record and edit this. I'm currently on slide 389 out of 505 and counting. So while I'd like to go over it in detail, I may have to save that for the post-release stream. So back to our poor individual here. He was a 40-year-old Japanese national stationed in the United Arab Emirates who died in his office parking lot. After a month of extensive investigation, they concluded that the company had been making him work excessive overtime. The standard working hours in Dubai are 48 hours a week. The results show that he'd been working 128 hours every week for 3 months prior to his death, 80 hours more than the average. Only the best working conditions from our favorite black company. All that? Good, because we're moving the fuck on. So, I don't know if it was extreme loyalty or fear that drove him to such lengths. In fact, due to Sony's complete disregard and disinterest in this matter, we know nothing about this exemplary employee. This is the only statement from them, which is, once again, that singular point for responding to the allegation. We offer heartfelt condolences to the deceased employee. We seriously accept the Labor Standards Inspection Office's ruling and will strengthen our efforts to prevent workplace injury and to manage our workers' health. Furthermore, we will sincerely address any guidance from the Labor Standards Inspection Office arising from this ruling. Fun fact? No, in fact, again, according to the CHRB report, not a single change was made. Not a single piece of guidance was taken upon. They, in fact, never responded to them after making this public statement. Like I just said, despite this statement, they received a total score of 0 in both policy changes and remedial action, including punitive damages or life insurance payouts to a hypothetical family. We, again, know nothing about this man because they gave that little fucks about a man who literally worked himself to death for them. The official cause of death was kaloshi. The last simple shi represents death. The previous two are excess and work. The literal translation for his cause of death was death from overwork. He died outside of his office building in the parking lot of cardiac arrest. Nameless, faceless, forgotten. Maybe he had a family, maybe he literally did give his entire life to this thankless, immoral company. In short, fuck Sony, and may God help their scared employees. Next up, harassment and discrimination. We've got workers' rights do not exist, and discrimination is A-OK if you can't prove it. The cases here are monumental, from class action lawsuits, plural, against PlayStation for gender discrimination in salaries and promotions, with mountains of evidence against them, to Sony Music for bullying, intimidation, emotional abuse, fear-based management, and even physical violence, amongst several other branches of the company. It's so bad over there that when Four Corners showed up to investigate, which is a TV show, by the way, that even the HR team flipped on them on a fucking dime. Oh, Rudy, look at that. They were in charge of Crunchyroll. What a neat little quinky-dink. Pricing and monetization. We've got public images for sale, make big number go bigger, and the customer is always stupid. We've already touched on most of this Orwellian malarkey, so this one will be faster and easier than my cheating ex-girlfriend. Thank fucking goodness, because I'm about to fucking die if I spend much more time on Sony and their bullshit nonsense. I think our best start would be looking at an old slide we talked about earlier. Do you know the one? Put some F's in chat for Sony if you think you do. Do any of you know what most of these failed products had in common? The pricing. 9 out of 10 consumers agree that the prices for these mediocre or subpar products were laughably egregious. This little kitten right here? That's Sony. On top of this, they also exhibit inconsistent pricing across regions and tap into that Disney CEO energy, bragging about how they're not charging the customers based on the value of the product, but pricing them based on how much they feel they can milk you for during a recession. They practically invented the charge more for less policy that has ruined modern day capitalism. A great example of that would be raising prices on a subscription-based products, whilst simultaneously, or within a few months of doing so, removing features. And of course, deleting user libraries on more than one occasion because cheap. By cheap, did I ever elaborate on this? The reason why they deleted the libraries from the PlayStation Network was because they didn't want to repay for the fees to relicense them. They didn't want to pay to relicense those movies to sell them. They figured we had already made all the money we're pretty much going to get from selling these movies, so let's not pay to relicense them. We'll just let the contract fall through and just delete them off our users' libraries. What assholes, man. What complete assholes. Moving on to Sonium, number 39, and always invest in buzzwords. Now, if you don't know, well, we'll touch on that in a moment. This one was surprisingly easy to find information on, probably because they're so fucking proud of it. Sonium is a blockchain, and how it works is that it's a 2-layer system piggybacking off of another chain known as Ethereum that provides all the networking and security so that Sony's blockchain can leech itself onto it for basically no cost while its users trade in NFTs, develop applications, or even host meetings. I don't know what the fuck this is supposed to be other than rent-seeking. It doesn't seem to do anything other than exist. I can't even find anything worse to throw at it than its own existence. So, moving on. Tone-deaf interviews. We got stocks and shareholders are the most important people on the planet. Corporate HR speak, and the customer is always stupid. Do you remember when a few minutes ago I mentioned how tone-deaf the Disney CEO is when he was bragging on interviews about how he would manipulate or take bad market situations by pricing them in just the right ways so that they could always take as much money from the consumers regardless of what they were actually paying for? Do you remember that? I mean, it was a long time ago, so you could have forgotten. Who could have guessed morally upstanding citizens like the Sony executives could also be so obnoxiously retarded? I haven't seen such little self-awareness in somebody since I went to high school. Too bad we don't have time for specific quotes, so let's explain the problems directly. Sony did an interview with Neil Druckmann where they flagrantly misrepresented and changed what he had said to such a degree that he ordered them to take it down under threat of suit of slander. Why would they do such a thing? My guess is probably number 23, lying about what he said to look good to investors, but I can confirm that, so it's left off the list. In summer 2025, Sadahiko Hayakawa, Sony Senior VP, did an earnings call that was reportedly riddled with corporate HR speak. And after looking at select quotes from it, I concur. It is not only fucking bad, but the substance behind them that they're talking about would likely warrant another 50 slides if I look too deep into it, which we obviously don't have time for. Former executive Chris Deering, we talked about him earlier, had reportedly gone on an interview talking extremely dismissively about layoffs and the people he had been affecting, Most companies feign sympathy or try to obscure the decision behind layers of nonsense numbers. This mofo, at least he's honest. You're going to have to take a few, figure out how to get through it, drive an Uber or whatever, find a cheap place to live, and go to the beach for a year. What inspiring words from former Sony executive Chris Deering. Contradictory public statements. Number 11. Who fucking cares? Overpromising and ignoring investors. We have outwardly lying to investors, the customer is always stupid, and margins matter more than profits. During Sony's live service fixation, they promised investors the world with them. Then when they had yet another identity crisis, they canceled pretty much all of them except for the famously terrible performers we know and hate today. When Sony was discussing the performance of PlayStation revenue, they talked about how successful and high sales were, their record console sales, neglecting to mention the ballooning development costs, Concord, and all their acquisitions and contracting outsourcing to avoid actually hiring employees that ate up all that profit. And when concerns were raised in meetings about that, they ignored them. At least this branch telling them to shove it up their ass instead of adhering to number 4, stocks and shareholders matter more than people, or are the most important people on the planet. At least they're telling them to shove it up their ass. Oh, what's this? Regarding, back to focus. Dear Mr. Streaming, you are exceptionally burnt out and tired. You have less than 12 hours to record before you need to start editing this if this is going to look even remotely good and warrant a pre-recorded premiere rather than a basic live stream. Please redirect your focus to the main topic at hand and patching up loose ends rather than continuing to add to your already overwhelming workload and strained time. Sincerely, myself. Really? Okay, if you insist. We had more to talk about, but I guess we can move on to why we're all here tonight. On December 13th, I saw an article detailing a lawsuit Sony was enacting. The article said that Sony was lobbying to get permission to turn off your internet if they found that you were pirating their content. You can see why that pissed me off and inspired me to make this entire fucking thing. Yeah, it's kind of also sad how believable this was. I even told my dad, and he said, ha ha ha, that doesn't really surprise me, and they may well win. Actually, literally everyone I've told about that version of the case believed me immediately without questions, saying things like, yeah, I believe that. I did the normal and rational thing and decided to make a manifesto, presentation, protest, whatever you want to call this, detailing every stupid thing Sony has ever done. While I may not have finished, I think I got a lot of it. Unfortunately, I lost too much time on Crunchy's bullshit alone. So true. It's rather impressive, actually, how badly they fucked that up in a short time span. That's what I was saying. Even more regrettably, however, is that I'm unable to find the original article. One small highlight, though, is that while the real case is monumentally less interesting, it's mildly less dystopian, and the judges are seemingly reluctant to hear it out. The real case is against Cox Communications, an internet service provider. Sony and other labels are suing them for allowing piracy websites to exist. Yeah, these retards can't even pay for real translators or employees, and yet they want internet service providers to not only turn away legitimate paying customers, but also hire extensive moderation teams to comb every website out of literal billions on their networks routinely to prevent piracy of their content exclusively. I wish I was making this up as satire, but this is real. This is a real story that's going on right now. I am almost beyond words at this gall, but I know one man who summarizes it quite well. Fleekazoid, if you may.
No,
not here to be outraged by this
morally upstanding company
team having predatory practices either, because to be outraged, I'd have to be surprised.
Thank you, Fleekazoid. Delightful insight as always. It's almost as if that clip was destined to be used against Sony. This sort of demand for widespread surveillance is appallingly similar in premise to YouTube's anti-ad blocker campaign. However, the basis for liability and guilt is incredibly different. While YouTube was being petty and acting against their own best interests, they were still acting within their own rights and using their own assets to combat it. Sony is demanding service providers do it for them. Now, for any brain-dead motherfuckers trying to defend Sony here, being the "leave the billion-dollar company alone" meme, I have just one thing to say to you. Sorry, I got distracted talking to my family. Guess we'll never know now. I'm not going to spend hours trying to remember that. How's your family doing, by the way? Give them a call. Anyone who wants to draw a comparison to gun stores or selling untraceable phones, I just want you to know that you need to calm down. How do I know they'd say that? Rather simple, actually. I thought about what I would say to argue against me if I only cared about winning and not being right. Piracy won't kill people like unrestricted distribution of and sales of guns will. Do you want to know how I know that gun control is necessary? Or rather effective? Poor choice of words there. Japan there it is, how gun control works. There we go. Japan has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world. So strict that not even the Yakuza have an easy time getting them. You're much more likely to be beaten to death with a pipe or baseball bat than shot. In some years, there were nearly or zero gun crime in that country at all. Canada, where I live, is also really strict on gun control. We haven't had a gun crime incident with a Canadian-bought gun since the 80s. But we still have gun crime. Guess how that works? America! 100% of gun crime in the past 40 plus years have been committed using guns bought in America then smuggled across the border for resale to criminals. As for the untraceable phones, those are used for everything from drug sales to bomb detonations to human trafficking. Those actually hurt people. I swear to God, if any of you motherfuckers claim revenue and or the stock market, so help you God. Furthermore, piracy is one of the few forms of unadulterated free speech we have left as a society. Our little way of saying you're asking too much. Companies know that they need to compete with free. That's why they used to try and provide convenient online services when competing in the digital space. But now they're so all consumed by corporate brain rot they've forgotten that simple fact. Frankly, I'm stuck trying to determine whether Sony taking a proactive action against piracy of this degree is more or less corporate brain rot than forgetting that it was something they needed to compete against. Don't get me wrong, this kind of demand is definitely corporate brain rot. I'm trying to determine whether trying to fight piracy on this scale is the brain rot. I'll make my decision at the end of this presentation. For now, let's talk the case. All information I'm using, unless stated otherwise, is going to be read and sourced from case number 118-CV-950-LO-JFA, which was decided on June 2nd, 2020. No information on the current case until otherwise stated later. The case started back in 2018, surprisingly enough, as a music lawsuit. Because much like everyone else in this era, when we think of piracy, we think of music. How outdated can you get? They reached an initial verdict in 2019 with a federal jury determining that Cox Communications needed to pay out $1 billion. Wow! Not even Bayer Pharmaceuticals was forced to pay that much. All of Facebook's class action lawsuits put together were less than that. Fuck the peasants, am I right? Or rather, Clede Mangeant de la Brioche. The verdict was for infringement of 10,017 songs. Wow! How much is that? $99,830.29 a song. I mean, I'm so glad to hear that justice exists in this world. Truly, it feels good to know that the judicial system works. I mean, Bayer Pharmaceutical kills 10,000 plus people, $600 million. Cox Communications hosts web servers where people pirate music. $1 billion, motherfucker! You know, a completely normal and reasonable ruling for a product literally everyone can receive for free across half a dozen legal services, right? Thankfully, they managed to get to the Fourth Circuit to hear their case and vacate the $1 billion in damages, citing a failure from Sony to prove that Cox Communications had profited off of the illegal distribution of their music. But in every case, the financial benefit to the defendant must flow directly from a third party's acts of infringement to establish vicarious liability. To prove vicarious liability, therefore, Sony had to show that Cox profited from its subscribers' infringing download and distribution of plaintiff's copyrighted songs. It did not. Wow, so it again, truly just reassuring to know that the judicial system works, where Sony said, give us money because your customers stole our music, and then the court said, yep, without even hearing Cox Communications out on the fact that we didn't profit off of this, therefore we are still upheld to, well, we'll cover that later. They sent the case back to trial to re-examine the case and determine other damages. Great, so we're still talking damages. That's beautiful to know. In June 25th, 2025, the Supreme Court agreed to oversee the case with two objectives in mind. So we're now back to the future, or the present now. Whether mere knowledge that subscribers are infringing and a failure to cut off services can make an ISP liable, and whether knowing about direct infringement alone can constitute willful violation of copyright law affecting statutory damages. I think not. I don't think so. Usually, I'd be against this, but we're talking about Sony here, and fuck Sony, and also fuck people who hate piracy. Oral arguments were heard in December 2025, and reports to indicate the justices are grappling with the broader implications of giving the verdict in Sony's favor. Primarily, whether holding ISPs liable in this way could force providers to disconnect entire households, businesses, or institutions based on the actions of a few users. Normally, Cox Communications would be protected under DMCA through something known as Safe Harbor Protection, which I mentioned just a few minutes ago. Or a few seconds, maybe. I don't fucking know. So how does Safe Harbor work? Safe Harbor has strict rules of enforcement needed to qualify. To qualify, an internet service provider needs to have a policy to terminate repeat infringers, reasonably enforce said policy, respond appropriate to copyright notices, and not encourage or profit from infringement. If any single one of these is not upheld, Safe Harbor is lost. Unfortunately, Cox Communications violated 3 out of 4 of these. Bypassing the extensive version of the violations, I'll briefly go into the case against them. Sony Music Entertainment, alongside and representing other companies such as Warner Brothers and Universal, amongst others, alleged that Cox Communications was willfully ignoring copyright violations on their networks. They used a company known as Mark Monitor, coordinating with Audible Magic to test this. Using a peer-to-peer network, Mark Monitor downloaded a file and cross-referenced it with Audible Magic to look for IP violations. They found some and sent 148 infringement notices to Cox. Seems excessive, don't you think? That's pretty much their entire case, by the way, that one file. That not only failed to download the full file, but also filed the infringement claims before completion. But the court documents immediately drop that story, not telling us what happened with this, but then go into detail about how the system is supposed to work and claims that they're not upheld reasonably due to Cox's communications allowance of a 13-strike system. They allege that Cox used that system to reduce abuse reports their team will have to deal with. I don't think Sony is one to talk about artificially ignoring problems, though, but alright. To control the overall number of complaints or notices it received from certain sources, Cox uses hard limits or caps. Cox raised the cap for RIAA incrementally, eventually holding it at 600 notices per day, though RIAA requested more. Jeez, I wonder why. Could it be that it's 148 infringement notices per song? Who knows? I wonder why they cap it at 600 notices a day and why RIAA demands more notices. I wonder why! Internal correspondence at Cox included the abuse team's enthusiasm towards caps, such as one email in reference to hundreds of daily DMCA complaints from Fox alone. We need to cap these suckers. Another email, this one from the head of the abuse team, targeted the statute, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, rather than a particular complainant. F the DMCA, I agree. The team remarked, we told each copyright holder to limit or give us the money to hire people. I second that. I second that action. Sony, Warner Brothers, Universal, Fox, if you guys want to keep bitching about the DMCA, then hire your own fucking staff, you fucking hypocrites. Sounds rather typical to me. Sounds like employees complaining about being overworked from the excessive abuse of the DMCA system. Like how Sony filed 148 infringement notices over a single file. You know what? I'm starting to understand why YouTube takes the DMCA so seriously. I wouldn't want to fuck with them either. I wonder what kind of incriminating shit we'd find if we went through the communications between executives at Fox, Warner Brothers, Sony, and Universal complaining about the standards they're presumably upheld to. It is this detail and realization here that turned me from wondering if Sony was in the right about this case to strongly in Cox Communications' favor, because reading out a list of their violations of the Safe Harbor Act, I started having wavering confidence in them. But upon reading this, my assessment is, fuck 'em! Of course, I'm quoting Sony here. As much as I'd like to spend my whole time going over the extensive details of this investigation and how utterly stupid it is, we are still short on time and must move on to the implications, execution, and most importantly, the corporate brain rot. But seriously, one download from a peer-to-peer network is fucking ridiculous. It's insane that you got a verdict on that. The case was frivolous and absurd. Was Cox Communications too lenient? Possibly, yes. Maybe even arguably. But the implications of what you were asking for were insane, and your reports were not only egregious, but needlessly aggressive. I would possibly even argue criminal. Targeting peer-to-peer networks is even more feeble effort than YouTube's battle against ad blockers. The only feasible way for those to be consistently upheld to your standards is to either shut down individual users, shut down the whole websites one at a time, punishing everyone, or have entire teams dedicated to examining every user interaction, putting unreasonable burden on the defendant that you would never uphold yourselves to, even if you're compelled to by a jury, and consistently violate all user privacy in doing this. The only fault I find with Cox Communications is that they would reinstate or reverse bans, which I didn't get far enough into the documents to evaluate. Now, the corporate brain rot behind the case. Naturally, there is an extensive gold mine of rot to go over here, but it's more or less just typical greed and desire for control, spawned not just from Sony, but all of their friends too. All of their supposed competition. Massive companies colluding with each other for their own gain. Guys, I don't know. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Is that even illegal? I don't think it is. This case was birthed from arrogance, not corporate brain rot. Sure, I could diagnose some vague symptoms, but they don't wholly embody them. I refuse to water down the meaning of these diagnoses. There's no denying that Sony executives are greedy bastards, and judging from Crunchyroll, there is more than an abundance of corporate burnout to be found within the company. But there's nothing here but raw, unadulterated greed and entitlement. Too bad it wasn't the dystopian pursuit I thought it was. I'd have so much to go on. Let's check on how the case is currently going. Surprisingly, over the summer, the whole tech industry showed up in support of Cox Communications. The extent of the decisions, pleas, and various documentation could take me the entirety of a summer to not just read, but also analyze and decipher. Major tech firms, including Google. Geez, I wonder why Google/YouTube would have a problem with these DMCA assholes. I wonder. Honestly, I'm backing Google on this one. Good job, Google. I hope Cox Communications wins. Maybe YouTube could chill the fuck out if they did. Amazon, Microsoft, Mozilla, Pinterest, and others filed amicus briefs backing Cox's appeals, citing the importance of user privacy and ISP liability. Jesus Christ, I forgot about that. Citing the importance of user privacy. Oh God. Oh fuck. Hypocritical? Yeah. Ironic? Unbelievably. Ulterior motives? Most definitely. Oh, God. But even the U.S. Department of Justice also filed an amicus brief earlier in 2025 recommending the Department of Justice said that, yeah, this case is stupid. Holy shit. How the fuck did it get passed? The United States Department of Justice filed an amicus brief arguing that the standard for contributory infringement should be clarified. I mean, I'm glad those judges were able to buy new vacation homes, the judges that filed in support of Sony. I'm so happy for them. On December 1st, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments of each side, debating on 3 key points. Whether mere knowledge and inaction is enough to hold an internet service provider liable, how far contributory infringement doctrine should extend under the DMCA, and the potential consequences for network access and enforcement. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any new developments on this since, so we're facing a rather sudden conclusion here, which is probably the best for everybody involved and my throat. If anybody wants to keep hearing me crash out about stuff, I have VODs and a handful of clip videos. I usually do weekly Sunday react streams to keep up on to date on current events and unwind. I've had to cancel those while working on this because it was such monumental bullshit. My sister has also requested that I continue. Having fun? My sister has also requested that I continue my TCG Card Shop series. My sister has also requested that I continue my TCG Card Shop series, and I'm planning on a lot of screaming for that too, so don't miss that if you enjoyed hearing me crash out about things. And I have several hour-long React compilation in the works for the past few months, with much, much more on the way. If you have made it this far, I can't thank you enough for making all of this effort worth it. Fuck Sony. Thank you guys, and a Happy New Year to all of you.
Wow! Tricked you, you stupid gypsy! Now it's time for me to be home free. Is there any chance we can...